She's too ugly to keep a husband, my boss announced at the company dinner, mocking my divorce. The door opened and a stunning man walked in, kissed my cheek and said, "Sorry I'm late. Gorgeous." The boss choked when he saw who. Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where loyalty dies, lies bleed out, and the truth hits like a slap to the face. These aren't just stories. They're confessions soaked in betrayal and regret. Ever spotted a red flag when it was already too late? Say it in the comments. Let's tear into today's tale. She's too ugly to keep a husband, my boss announced, waving his glass at me while addressing the entire table of colleagues. That's why she got divorced. Look at her. The dining room fell silent. 20 coworkers stared at their plates while heat rushed to my face. 5 years at this company, and this was how he treated me after my painful divorce. That's when the door opened. A tall, striking man in an impeccable suit walked straight to me, kissed my cheek, and said, "Sorry I'm late. Gorgeous." My boss choked on his wine when he saw who it was. The universe has a strange way of delivering justice exactly when you need it most. I'm Lyra Everett, and before I tell you how I systematically dismantled the career of the man who tried to destroy mine, I want you to know something. This isn't just another story of workplace revenge. This is about reclaiming power when someone tries to strip you of your dignity. If you've ever been humiliated, underestimated, or pushed aside, stay with me until the end. Each moment of this story might give you the courage to stand up when it matters most. That night at Caslano's restaurant was supposed to be a celebration of our department's record-breaking quarter. Instead, it became the stage for my public humiliation. Damon Fowler, my direct supervisor and the company's golden boy, had always been cruel behind closed doors. But this was different. This was calculated destruction. I'd finalized my divorce from Preston just 3 weeks earlier after discovering his 2-year affair with my closest friend. The wounds were still raw, and Damon knew it. When the handsome stranger kissed my cheek and slid into the chair beside me, I was as shocked as everyone else. Up close, I recognized him immediately. Julian Walsh, CEO of Horizon Innovations, the client our company had been desperately trying to land for months. "Lyra," he said warmly, "I spotted you from across the restaurant and had to come say hello. Our conversation at the industry conference last month was the highlight of my evening." Terrence's face transformed from smug satisfaction to panic in seconds. The wine he'd been drinking dribbled down his chin as he struggled to compose himself. "Mr. Walsh," he stammered, half rising from his seat. "What an unexpected pleasure." Julian barely acknowledged him, keeping his attention on me. "I've been reviewing your proposal. It's exactly what we've been looking for. Perhaps we could discuss the details over lunch next week." The table remained silent, everyone processing what was happening. I felt a slow smile spread across my face. "The first genuine one in weeks." "I'd be delighted," I replied. That night changed everything. As I drove home to my empty apartment, I didn't cry as I had every night since Preston left. Instead, I planned. I started working at Palmer Technologies 5 years ago, climbing from junior analyst to senior project manager through pure determination. My marriage to Preston had been crumbling for years before I discovered the affair. But I'd poured my heartbreak into my work, exceeding every target. 3 months ago, the director position opened up, a role I was perfectly qualified for. I'd prepared an extensive presentation outlining my vision for the department, supported by 5 years of exceptional performance reviews. "You lack executive presence," Damon had told me afterward, not bothering to hide his smirk. He promoted Brian instead, a man who'd been with the company half as long and whose reports I regularly corrected. What no one knew, not even my closest work friends like Valencia and Dexter, was that Damon had cornered me at last year's holiday party, drunk and insistent. When I firmly rejected his advances, something dark flashed in his eyes. "Be careful, Lyra," he'd whispered. I decide who succeeds here. After being passed over for promotion, I began documenting everything.
Each
inappropriate comment, every instance where women's ideas were dismissed only to be praised when repeated by men.
The
subtle ways he undermined female employees' confidence. I created a password-protected document, adding to
it daily.
I also noticed patterns in our financial reports, discrepancies that didn't add up, client overcharges, expense reports with suspicious entries, equipment that disappeared. I said nothing, but took meticulous notes.
The
morning after the dinner incident, I arrived at work to find a message from Valencia asking to meet for coffee.
We'd
always been friendly, but never close outside of work hours. What happened last night was unacceptable, she said. Once we were seated in the corner of a cafe 2 blocks from the office. And it wasn't the first time. She slid her phone across the table. On it was a recording from a meeting where Damon had taken credit for her marketing strategy, the same strategy he'd initially called too ambitious when she proposed it. I'm not the only one, she said quietly. By the end of the day, 2 more colleagues had approached me. Dexter had documentation showing how Damon had stolen his client acquisition method and presented it as
his own.
Lumi from accounting had noticed the same financial irregularities I had, plus more.
We
should meet, I suggested, not to complain but to strategist.
That
Saturday, the 4 of us gathered at my apartment. I made coffee while they settled around my kitchen table, nervous. Energy filling the room. Before we start, I said, I need you all to
understand something.
What we're discussing isn't just about personal grievances. This is about systematic misconduct that's harming the company, our clients, and our careers. I shared my documentation, carefully organized, factual, unemotional. They added theirs. By evening, we had a comprehensive picture of a man who'd built his career on taking credit for others' work, manipulating numbers, and systematically holding back women and minorities from advancement. The quarterly board meeting is in 2 weeks, Dexter noted. Damon will present his department update, and he'll certainly take credit for Horizon innovations, Valencia added. He's already telling everyone he's the one who secured the connection. I felt a plan forming, not based on emotion or personal attacks, but on cold, hard
facts. Here's what we'll do, I said.
The next 2 weeks were tense. We continued gathering evidence while performing our jobs flawlessly. I reached out to Julian Walsh with a simple question about his availability for a video call during our upcoming board meeting to discuss implementation details. When the day arrived, Damon strut-deaded into the boardroom in his expensive suit, confidence radiating as he prepared to present his department's achievements. The board members settled in, and our CEO, Everett Perry, opened the meeting. When Terrence's turn came, he launched into his presentation, highlighting the department's successes, most of which were directly attributable to team members he'd sidelined. The crown jewel of his presentation was the announcement of securing Horizon Innovations as a client, a deal potentially worth millions. Through persistent relationship building and strategic negotiation, he boasted, I've managed to bring Horizon into our portfolio after competitors have tried and failed for years. I felt rather than saw Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi tense beside me. This was the moment. Before we move on, I said, raising my hand,
I
believe there's been a misunderstanding about the Horizon Innovations relationship. The room fell silent. Everett looked surprised at the interruption, but nodded for me to continue. With your permission, I
said,
I've invited someone who can clarify. I opened my laptop, and within moments, Julian Walsh's face appeared on the main screen. Good morning, everyone, he said pleasantly. Lyra suggested I might help clear up some confusion. What followed was Julian explaining how he'd met me at an industry conference, been impressed by my insights, and subsequently reviewed the proposal I'd sent him. He had never met or spoken with Damon. Terrence's face drained of color. There must be some mistake, he interrupted. I've been overseeing all client acquisitions. That's interesting, Julian replied. Considering Lyra is the only representative from your company I've had any contact with. Everett frowned, looking between Damon and me. Is there something I'm missing here? Actually, I said calmly. There's quite a bit. I distributed copies of a report to each board member. This isn't a complaint about personal treatment. This is a comprehensive analysis of how our department has been mismanaged for the past 2 years. The report detailed everything. The financial discrepancies, the talent suppression, the credit stealing, all meticulously documented with dates, figures, and supporting evidence. What is this? Damon demanded, his voice rising. Some kind of witch hunt because you're bitter about not getting promoted. I didn't respond to the bait. Instead, I nodded to Valencia, who stood. I can verify the section regarding attribution of work, she said professionally, playing the recording from her phone. Dexter followed with his evidence. Then Lumi presented the financial analysis. Throughout it all, I remained calm, focusing on facts, not emotions. This wasn't about my humiliation at the dinner or his rejection of my promotion. This was about business misconduct that had cost the company money, opportunities, and talent. The board members exchanged glances. Everett's expression had grown increasingly grave. These are serious allegations, he finally said. Damon, do you have a response? Damon's confident facade cracked. This is clearly a coordinated attack. He sputtered. They're all friends. They're conspiring against me because I hold them to high standards. The numbers speak for themselves, I replied evenly. And there are dozens more examples not included in that report. We can provide those too if needed. Everett asked everyone except the board members to step outside. As the door closed behind us, I could hear Taryn's voice rising, then the firm tone of our CEO cutting him off. In the hallway, Valencia squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, she whispered. You stood up. We all did. For 30 minutes, we waited in tense silence. Then, Everett's assistant appeared, asking me to return to the boardroom alone. The air felt heavy as I walked in. Damon was gone. Everett and the board members sat with grim expressions. Sit down, Lyra, Everett said, gesturing to a chair. And that's when everything changed. They had questions, dozens of them. How long had I been aware of these issues? Why hadn't I come forward sooner? How had I managed to build a relationship with Horizon while performing my regular duties? I answered truthfully. I explained how I tried to address issues through proper channels, but been dismissed. How I'd feared retaliation if I spoke up alone. How I'd built professional relationships at industry events on my own time because I believed in the company's potential. What happened at the company dinner the other night? One board member asked. Mr. Walsh mentioned something about interrupting an uncomfortable situation. I hesitated. This was where personal and professional collided. Damon publicly mocked my recent divorce, I said simply. Mr. Walsh happened to be dining nearby and came over to say hello. It was coincidental timing. The board members exchanged looks. We've placed Damon on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. Everett finally said, based on what we've seen today, that investigation will likely confirm your reports. Findings. He paused, studying me carefully. We find ourselves in need of an interim department head while we conduct a proper search for a permanent replacement. Would you be willing to step into that role and be considered as a candidate for the permanent position? The world seemed to still 5 years of work, months of documentation, weeks of strategic planning, all leading to this moment. I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. As I left the boardroom, I saw Damon being escorted to his office by security to collect his personal items. Our eyes met briefly. In that moment, I realized the most devastating part for him wasn't losing his job. It was realizing I'd beaten him not through emotional outbursts or personal attacks, but by being exactly what he claimed I wasn't: executive material. That evening, I returned to my apartment and poured myself a glass of wine. My phone buzzed. with a text from Julian Walsh. Dinner next week to discuss implementation details as colleagues, of course.
I
Smiled. The future suddenly held possibilities I hadn't dared imagine weeks ago. But as I sat in the quiet of my living room, I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. Because what Damon and the board didn't know was that the financial discrepancies I discovered went much deeper than one man's misconduct.
They
Pointed to something more systematic, something that reached all the way to the executive floor, and I now had the perfect position to investigate further. The next morning, I walked into the office as interim department head.
The
shift in energy was palpable. Curious glances, whispered conversations that stopped when I approached, and a few genuine smiles from those who'd witnessed Taryn's behavior firsthand. Valencia met me at my new office door. "Congratulations," she said, her expression a mix of admiration and concern. "Are you ready for this?" "More than ready," I replied, setting my bag on the desk that had been Taryn's just yesterday. "But we have work to do beyond just celebrating." Over the next few days, I scheduled individual meetings with every team member, not to interrogate or intimidate, but to listen. What did they need to succeed? What obstacles had they faced?
what
Ideas had been dismissed that deserved reconsideration. The pattern that emerged confirmed my suspicions. Damon hadn't acted alone in his mistreatment and manipulation. He'd been protected, even encouraged by higher-ups who benefited from his methods. Exactly 1 week into my new role, Everett called me to his office. His assistant, Ivy, gave me a tight smile as she ushered me in. "Lyra," Everett greeted, not rising from behind his imposing desk. "Please sit. How are you settling in?" "Very well. Thank you," I replied, noticing the tension around his eyes.
the team has
"Been remarkably resilient."
good.
"Good." He shuffled some papers, not quite meeting my gaze. "I wanted to touch base about the quarterly numbers. The board is concerned about the discrepancies you highlighted." "I'm addressing those now," I said. "In fact, I've been reviewing past financial reports in detail." Something flickered across Everett's face so brief I almost missed it.
Fear.
"That's not necessary," he said quickly.
The
"Board has authorized an external audit. Your focus should be moving forward, not dwelling on past issues."
Of course, I
agreed smoothly, though understanding the patterns helps prevent future problems. Everett leaned forward. "Between us, Lyra, Damon made enemies, powerful ones. Your promotion is a fresh start for everyone. I'd hate to see you inherit his problems." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. I maintained my composure while my mind raced. This wasn't just about protecting the company from embarrassment. Everett was worried about what else I might find. "I appreciate your concern," I said.
standing.
"Rest assured, my priority is the department's success." As I turned to leave, Everett added, "The external auditors start Monday. They'll need full access to all financial records." "Absolutely," I replied.
Transparency is
"Essential." The moment I left his office, I texted Lumi.
need to talk. Not at the
Office. That night, Lumi, Valencia, Dexter, and I met at a small diner 20 minutes from the company over greasy fries and coffee. I shared my conversation with Everett.
he's
"Scared," Lumi said, her accounting mind already connecting dots. "And he should
be
Those discrepancies I found, they're consistent with someone siphoning funds through shell vendors. The same pattern appears in the client billing," Dexter added. "Small overcharges spread across dozens of accounts, not enough for any single client to notice, but adding up to hundreds of thousands annually." Valencia, who handled marketing communications, looked troubled. Last year, Everett personally approved a six-figure budget for a marketing campaign that barely materialized. When I asked questions, Taryn told me to
drop it.
I pulled out my laptop. Auditors arrived Monday. Whatever evidence exists might disappear before then. We worked through the night, pulling reports, cross-referencing transactions, and building a secure digital repository of everything we found. By morning, we had compelling evidence that Everett and at least 2 other executives had been systematically embezzling from the company for years, using Damon as their willing enforcer. "This goes beyond workplace harassment or credit stealing," Dexter said grimly. "This is criminal." "So, what do we do?" Valencia asked. "Go to the board again?" I thought about Everett's subtle threat and shook my head. "Not yet. We need to understand who on the board might be involved. For now, we document everything and create backups." The weekend passed in a blur of activity. We carefully copied files, captured screenshots, and archived emails. Monday morning arrived with a sense of forwarding as the external auditors set up in the conference room. At precisely 10 a.m., Everett called an unexpected all-hands meeting. The entire company gathered in the main presentation area as he took the stage, his executive team flanking him like a royal court. "As many of you know, we've had some leadership changes recently," he began, his voice carrying the practiced warmth of a seasoned executive. "Following an internal review, we've identified some concerning business practices within the project management department." My heart pounded as I realized what was happening. This wasn't damage control. It was a preemptive strike. While we initially believed these issues were limited to one individual, our preliminary investigation suggests a broader pattern of misleading reports and data manipulation. Everett continued. "The external auditors will help us determine the full extent of the problem." His gaze found me in the crowd. "In the interest of a thorough investigation, we're placing all senior members of the project management team on administrative leave, effective immediately." The room erupted in whispers. Valencia grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. Dexter's face hardened as he understood we were being neutralized.
"This is a
precautionary measure," Everett assured everyone, "not an accusation of wrongdoing."
But it was exactly that. By
placing us on leave, he was cutting off our access to the very evidence we needed to prove his guilt. Even worse, he was positioning us as the perpetrators, not the whistleblowers. As the meeting dispersed, Everett approached me directly, security personnel hovering nearby. "I'm sorry it came to this, Lyra," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You should have focused on moving forward, not digging up the past." I met his gaze
steadily.
"Is that what Damon did wrong? Digging too deep?" A flash of surprise crossed his face before he composed himself. "It will need your laptop and company phone. You'll be escorted to collect your personal belongings." As security walked me to my office, I noticed similar scenes playing out with Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi. Our eyes met across the office floor, a silent communication of resolve. They couldn't know we'd already secured the evidence they were trying to bury. That evening, we gathered at my apartment again, shell-shocked but determined. "They're setting us up," Valencia said, pacing the length of my living room. "By the time the audit finishes, they'll have scrubbed everything and planted evidence against us." "Not everything," I replied, pulling out a flash drive from my bag. "Remember how I insisted on taking bathroom breaks during our escorted exit? I had this hidden in my personal makeup bag." The flash drive contained copies of the most damning evidence, documents showing Everett's direct approval of fraudulent vendors, emails discussing how to conceal overcharges, and the trail of money flowing to offshore accounts. "This isn't enough," Dexter argued. "They'll claim we fabricated it all." "You're right," I agreed.
"Which is why we need to be smarter than they are."
I outlined my
plan.
A plan that had been forming since I first discovered the extent of the corruption. We wouldn't go to the board, who might include Everett's accomplices. We wouldn't go to the media, who might sensationalize without understanding the complexity. Instead, we would go directly to the company's largest shareholders and clients. Simultaneously, people with real power and a vested interest in the truth. "It's risky,"
Lumi warned.
"If we're wrong about any of this, we're not wrong," I said firmly. And we have one advantage they don't expect. What's that? Valencia asked.
I
Smiled for the first time.
That day.
Julian Walsh. The following morning, I called Julian, not as a potential romantic interest, but as the CEO of a company about to enter into a major contract with mine. Lyra, he answered, warmly. I was just thinking about you. Julian, I need your help, I said, skipping pleasantries. And I need to know I can trust you. His tone shifted immediately. What's happened?
I
explained the situation, the fraud we'd uncovered, our administrative leave, and Everett's likely plan to frame us. I was careful to stick to facts, not emotions. Send me everything you have, Julian said without hesitation. My legal team will review it today. There's more, I added. Horizon isn't the only client being overcharged. I have evidence affecting at least 11 major accounts. Julian was silent for a moment. This could be industry-wide news. Lyra,
No.
That's why I need your help reaching out to the other affected clients. Coming from you, CEO to CEO. They'll listen. By afternoon, Julian had confirmed what we already knew. The evidence was compelling. By evening, he'd arranged a conference call with 4 other CEOs whose companies had been systematically overcharged. Meanwhile, Dexter activated his network of industry connections to quietly approach 3 major shareholders with our findings, not as a scandal, but as a serious governance issue requiring immediate attention. For 3 days, we operated in careful silence, building our coalition. Valencia prepared a comprehensive presentation that laid out the evidence chronologically, while Lumi created financial summaries that even non-accountants could understand. On the 4th day, Everett called me. Nadine, he said, his voice artificially pleasant. I hoped we might discuss a mutual resolution to our current situation. What did you have in mind? I asked neutrally. The preliminary audit has raised some questions about financial approvals that appear to have your digital signature. His tone hardened slightly. However, the company is willing to accept your resignation without further investigation. We'd provide a generous severance package, of course. There was the trap closing. They'd already begun fabricating evidence against me. That's a generous offer, I replied, keeping my voice even. When would you need my decision? By close of business tomorrow, he said. For your own benefit, I suggest accepting. The alternatives would be unpleasant for everyone. After hanging up, I immediately called our group. It's happening, I told them. They're making their move. So we make ours, Dexter replied. The next morning, as Everett waited for my resignation, a different kind of meeting was taking place. In the private dining room of the Grand Hotel downtown, Julian Walsh hosted breakfast. 4 or 5 CEO, 3 major shareholders, and 2 board members who'd been carefully vetted as uninvolved in the fraud. I arrived last, carrying the final piece of evidence, Taryn's personal notebook, which his assistant had secretly provided after witnessing his abusive behavior for years. In it, Damon had documented conversations with Everett about which employees to silence, which clients to overcharge, and how to conceal their activities. For 2 hours, I presented our case not as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but as a finance professional exposing systematic fraud. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, Eleanor Harding, the company's largest individual shareholder, spoke. I've seen enough. This requires immediate action. By noon, the board members had called an emergency session. By 3, Everett received a call demanding his presence at the corporate headquarters. Immediately. By 5, security was escorting him and 2 other executives from the building. I wasn't there to see it. Instead, I was sitting with Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi in my apartment, waiting. At 5:30, my phone rang. Eleanor Harding herself. Miss Everett, she said formally. The board has removed Everett Perry, effective immediately. We've also terminated Peter Griffith and Wendy Talbot for their participation in the fraud. I closed my eyes briefly, relief washing over me. Thank you for taking this seriously. We're in your debt, she replied.
The
Board has asked me to inform you that all 4 of you are not only reinstated, but will receive formal apologies. Additionally, we'd like you to continue as interim department head while we complete a thorough executive search.
She paused.
And Miss Everett, the board hopes you'll apply for the permanent position. After hanging up, I looked at my friends, the allies who had risked everything to stand with me. It's over, I said simply. Valencia shook her head. It's not over. It's just beginning. She was right. Over the next month, the company underwent a complete transformation. The external audit expanded to review 5 years of records. 3 more executives were removed. Clients who had been overcharged received full restitution.
And me, I
applied for the permanent department head position. After 3 rounds of interviews with the restructured executive team, I was appointed not just department head, but vice president of operations, a new role with oversight of multiple departments. My first official act was promoting Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi to senior positions where their talents would be recognized and rewarded. My second was implementing a company-wide anonymous reporting system for ethical concerns. 6 months after that fateful dinner where Damon had publicly humiliated me, I hosted a department celebration at the same restaurant. As everyone enjoyed their meals, I stood to make a toast.
To
resilience, I said, raising my glass, and to the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Across the room, I caught Julian's eye. He smiled warmly. No longer just a business ally, but something more. We'd been dating quietly for months, taking things slowly, both aware of how our professional relationship had evolved into personal connection. Later that evening, as Julian drove me home, he asked the question that had been hovering between us for months. You could have stopped after exposing
Damon, he said.
Why risk everything to go after Everett, too? I consider my answer carefully because true change doesn't come from removing one bad actor. It comes from transforming the system that enabled them. He nodded thoughtfully. When I walked into that restaurant and saw how that man was treating you, I had no idea I was stepping into such a significant moment. Neither did I admitted. But I've learned that sometimes the worst moments in our lives become the catalyst for the best changes. As we pulled up to my apartment building, I thought about how far I'd come. From the woman crying alone after her divorce to someone who had transformed not just her own life, but an entire company culture. Want to know the irony? I asked Julian as he walked
me to my door.
Damon was right about one thing that night. I couldn't keep my husband, but not because I was too ugly, because I was too strong to stay where I wasn't valued. Julian took my hand. Their loss, my gain. As I unlocked my door, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I glanced down and couldn't help but smile. Everett Perry had just been indicted on 37 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and financial misconduct. Justice comes in many forms, I murmured. Speaking of justice, Julian said, Did I tell you Damon applied for a position at one of my competitors' companies? Their CEO called me for a reference. What did you say? I asked. Julian's eyes twinkled. The truth that he lacks. Executive presence. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or humiliated, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's rising so far above them that they become irrelevant to your story. This journey taught me that standing up for yourself can inspire others to do the same. If my story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Like and subscribe to make sure you never miss another story of transformation and triumph. Because together we can create workplaces where talent is recognized, integrity is rewarded, and no one has to suffer in silence.